Hi there sociologists, welcome to another online lesson. This is the same question that we've looked at before because I'm going to teach you today how to write paragraph 2 to this 12-mark question. Let's just remind ourselves what the question is. It says, discuss how far sociologists agree that the nuclear family remains the most important family in British society. And remember, our aim was that by the end of year 9 you would be able to write a comprehensive answer to this 12-mark question. If we just remind ourselves what the different parts of the question are asking you to do, the first part, highlighted in yellow, is asking you to argue to what extent various sociologists will agree with that statement. Remember, it's not just a black and white, some are for it, some are against it. You are having to go a little bit more nuanced, and you are having to say how far some sociologists agree. So some might completely agree, some might completely disagree, and others might be somewhere in the middle. You can write a legitimate and comprehensive response by giving two sociologists who both agree with the statement, so long as those sociologists have different degrees of agreement. So one might completely agree, another might partially agree, and that is still two different opinions. The nuclear family, remind yourself of this, is two heterosexual adults married and with children, and this is the family type which is and has been for a very long time the most common family type in British society, but this question is asking you if it is the most important. And we know that it once was the most important. It was certainly the one which everyone aspired to, or at least most people did. But I want you to think of ways in which its status remains high, and other ways in which it has lost its status. And last lesson we looked at ways in which it has lost its status when you talked about Rappaport and Rappaport. But since you've done that, you've also learned about George Murdoch and his functionalist idea that the nuclear family performs 4 roles, has 4 functions, which only the nuclear family can truly perform to a high standard. And we're going to talk about that in our second paragraph today. And just finally, to remind yourself, we are not talking about the international family type, so we can't use kibbutz. And even though we are talking about George Murdoch, we won't focus so much on his idea of the nuclear family being universal. Although we will touch on it very gently, we will spend most of our time talking about his idea that the nuclear family performs 4 functions which can be best performed by that particular family type. So this is a reminder of the paragraph we wrote last lesson. You've got this in your book, and you should have saved some space underneath this paragraph because you're going to continue today underneath this paragraph. If you haven't saved space, then go to the next page and either write this paragraph out again really quickly or just continue and link back in your book. It'll be nice to have the 12 marker all in one place though, so if you haven't left space, I would suggest you write this out before you continue. I'm not going to read this out to you because you do have it in your book, but if you do want to pause the video and just read it to refresh your memory, you are most welcome to do that. And this is how it looked with the point, with the evidence, the explanation and the link all highlighted. So when we are peeling, our point makes up 10% of our paragraph, our evidence makes up 20%, our explanation is the chunkiest part of our paragraph, and that's 50% of our text, and then another 20% at the bottom there is your link. So paragraph 2 will follow the same format. Okay, so you're going to make a point which you'll back up with evidence, which you will then explain in detail, and you will then link it all together and link it back to the statement. And this point is going to come from the perspective of George Murdoch, the functionalist. So your first sentence is going to say, on the other hand, blank, such as Murdoch would argue. Now, in the first paragraph, we use the term sociologists because Rappaport and Rappaport are not affiliated with a particular social perspective. So when we don't know what sociologist or what perspective our sociologist is coming from, or we don't think our sociologist has a particular alignment, such as the Rappaports, we can just say sociologists. But when we are speaking from a specific perspective, it is great to name that perspective, because then you are suggesting that in Murdoch's case, he is just one of many people who are all part of this perspective. So you are saying functionalists, such as Murdoch would argue. What you're saying there by the such as is, again, you are saying I am providing one such functionalist, but there are also many others who would argue the same. You are showing a greater depth of understanding. If you were just to write, on the other hand, George Murdoch argues, that's great, but you're just giving one point of view. If you say functionalist such as George Murdoch, you are showing that you know there are more points of view out there. So you're going to say, on the other hand, functionalists such as George Murdoch would argue, and then you're going to tell us what he thinks about the nuclear family. Very simply, is it the most important in society? Yes or no? Now remember, he wrote from an American perspective, and therefore you are going to talk about functionalists in general whilst referencing George Murdoch, so you can then update his work for British society. So write this first sentence for me now. I'm not going to give you the finishing part of the sentence. I want you to think about what you think is the best way of finishing this sentence. You're then going to move on to your evidence. So why does George Murdoch believe this? He believes this because, and then I want you to include two pieces of evidence. The first one is going to spend a little bit less time on it. The second one is going to be the bulk of our evidence. So the first one is his view on the status of the nuclear family worldwide. What does he believe about the nuclear family worldwide? And the second one is, what are the four functions that he believes the nuclear family plays? Remember George Murdoch's ears. Okay, what are those four functions? EERS. Your explanation is now talking about these four functions in more detail. So you're going to say this means that the nuclear family remains the most important family in British society because. Now you've already mentioned Murdoch's four functions of the family. Yeah, you've already mentioned Murdoch's four ears. But why is the nuclear family best placed to provide these functions? Why can't a lone parent or same-sex family perform these functions? And I want you to use these arguments in your explanation. So you might want to take these four functions one at a time, or you might want to take just two of the four functions, and you might want to say, okay, the economic function, that is far better for the nuclear family to do than a lone parent family. Why is a nuclear family better at providing the economic support for children than a lone parent family? Look at the reproductive function. Why is that better for a nuclear family to do that than a same-sex family or a lone parent family? So because the nuclear family is the only family type according to functionalist that can really meet all of these functions and really provide and perform these functions, it is the most important family type. So in this explanation, you are simply saying why the nuclear family is better than lone parent or same-sex families when it comes to performing these four functions. Now remember, this is a functionalist perspective. Not all of us agree with that. Then your link, once you've explained why the nuclear family is better placed for those four functions, you are then going to say why that makes the nuclear family the most important in British society. So very simply, you are talking about the word stability. This is what the nuclear family, more than any other family type, provides according to functionalists. So in the explanation, you're talking about why the nuclear family best performs each individual function, and in your link, you are using your explanation to prove why the nuclear family is the most important family type. Give it a go, send me your paragraph, and I will help you make corrections as and when you need to. Have a lovely day.